G'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I'm Jack Roney.
And I'm Harry Culver.
And Harry, let's introduce today's special guest, Dr. Ed Rosick. Ed is a writer and physician living in the urban wilds of central Michigan. His diverse works of speculative fiction, from the sublime to surreal, have appeared in numerous award-winning magazines and anthologies, including Pulphouse, Sick Cruising, The Half That You See, and Monstrous Tales Volume 2. Ed is also an accomplished non-fiction writer, having authored hundreds of articles on nutrition, health, and wellness, and the book Optimal Prevention, which details common sense ways to fight against the five most common killers today. I might actually ask you that later, Ed, if we have time. What are those five? But we might come
Oh,
back to that.
you need to
Absolutely.
buy his book.
Maybe I should buy your book. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Keep that as a mystery. So, Ed has numerous short stories published since the early 90s, and his first novel, Deep Roots, was published in 2022. His anthology of 12 short stories was recently published by Baynam Books Press. So, g'day, Ed. Welcome from Australia, and good to have you on our podcast.
Well, thanks, Jack. It's good to be here. I really appreciate you two making the having the time to have me on, and especially having this time difference because while it's Sunday night here in Michigan, it's Monday morning over there in Australia. I told my wife I should ask you guys about the stock market. I could get some tips so I could buy some stocks if it's Monday.
Yeah, yeah, we're coming to you from the future. So,
Yeah, you told me it didn't work that way, so
Yeah,
I was a
yeah.
little disappointed.
And you really don't want my advice.
so Ed, can we get straight into it? So, I'm intrigued. We've actually had another guest who was a doctor as well, and it goes back to the old saying: if you want something done, get a busy person to do it. So you're a doctor, you're a medical doctor, a physician. You've done obviously a lot of medical studies over the years, but somehow you've still found time to do creative writing. Can we start by how do you find the time to write? You've obviously been writing for a long time, and how have you managed to juggle that with your medical commitments and your studies and your professional career, and still get time to tinker with writing?
Yeah, a great question. Excuse me, I do it now because I retired in September of 22 or partly retired. So I'm only doing part-time practice now. So that's made a huge difference. But for the vast majority of my 33 years in practice, I got up early. I mean, I would get up at 4:30 every morning, maybe not every morning, but almost every morning to write. I'm more of a morning afternoon writer. Everybody who writes has their own niche when they want to write or when they feel they write best. I do best in the morning or early afternoon, so I would get up early and I would write. And I think for anybody who's busy, anybody who has another job, which is the vast majority of us writers, right? Because very few of us are Stephen King or
Mm.
Dean Koontz or anybody who's making the millions. You have to have another gig to pay your bills. So for me, that's how it worked. I got up early and I wrote, and it worked pretty well.
So, given that you are so busy or pre-retirement, what drove you? There must have been some in a desire that was driving you to get you out of bed at 4:30 in the morning. There must have been some inner drive to where did that come from? That inner
Yeah,
drive.
great question. I tell you, I think it comes from everyone. I think if we just to back up a little bit, I think everybody, I think all human beings are natural storytellers. I really believe that with my heart and soul. I think it's ingrained in our DNA. Why? I don't know. Ask God, nature, whatever you want to believe in. But I think we're all storytellers. And I think some of us feel that so strongly that we have to write and we have to tell stories. And so I've been doing it. I've been writing since I was 5 years old. I wrote a book of poetry when I was five. I wrote my first short story when I was 10. Uh, and I've written ever since. There was probably a period of a few years once that nasty testosterone kicked in when I was a teenager. I had other pursuits so I
Hmm.
probably didn't pursue writing as much as I probably should have in hindsight, but that's okay. But once I got into college and realized, I sort of missed that and started writing again. And so I've been writing, 40 plus years.
Yeah, I kind of look back on myself. I'm probably the same when I was a kid, I think I always had a natural tendency towards short story writing and poetry. Didn't do a lot of it. I was quite good at school and in the subject of English. But then I joined the police academy straight out of high school, and then my policing career took off. And literally, I didn't even think about creative writing probably for about another 20 years. And then it just kind of
Wow.
came flooding back. And I often talk about I started writing when I felt I had something to say. I'd probably experienced enough. I think, Harry, we've talked about this a lot, haven't we? I think
Yeah.
you're probably in the same boat.
I look, I spent time. I mean, I found writing, creative writing, easy at school. My teacher couldn't really give me too much crap when I wasn't doing much because I'd get A's. And so yeah, it was. I found it really easy to do, but it wasn't something that I felt was a burning desire. But then I'd say for many decades after leaving school, I wanted to write a novel, but I couldn't find the time or couldn't find the sort of, I did a lot of writing with respect to my work as, whatever I was doing, all of the different jobs I've done was always required a lot of writing involved. And so I always was worried, I think, that by going down the route of trying to do creative writing, I would find it difficult to sustain that effort and motivation. And so that was part of it, was procrastination, and part of fear of not being able to continue or not being able to write under pressure. But then when I got the opportunity and just sort of like had a go at it sort of became easy. To a certain extent, you get this flow and you just start writing. And I just wrote. The first creative passage I wrote was purely from memory, so it wasn't really creative. It was like work writing a scene from a job you go to, and just see how it goes. Yeah.
It's interesting because I would get ornery, and I still do if I don't write. If I don't get
Now, yes.
stuff written, I get. I mean, I can tell. My wife can tell. It's like she'd say, "You need to go write something. Just go away and get happy again." I mean, it's just the drive has always been there, and when I finally realized that, I just kept doing it. But I think, like Jack said earlier, I during my professional career, I also did a lot of nonfiction writing.
Mm.
I find for various journals, medical magazines, especially back in the good old days, 90s, 2000s, well, before the economy went to hell. Pay for nonfiction stuff it was good. I mean, I'm talking 50 cents to $1 a word. So,
Wow.
yeah, absolutely wow. So I thought, I can do this, and I did it, and I was good at it. And I wrote a lot of nonfiction stuff. I like writing nonfiction. I find it easy to do. I don't love it. I
Mm.
love writing fiction. I love writing short stories. I love writing poetry and novels. Nonfiction comes easy to me. I think I'm pretty good at it, but if I have to choose, I will choose to do fiction versus nonfiction.
And
Yeah.
I think I'm the same. So, Harry, coming from a paramedic background, Ed, you're a doctor. I came from a police background. I spent many years writing police reports and court briefs and strategic documents and high level writing. So I think my writing skills generally from a non-fiction point of view were developed through that. But again, a lot of it was my work. It was boring. It was, I didn't get a lot of enjoyment out of that. It was, I had to complete certain templates and convey certain information. But my question for you, Ed, is you said you love writing fiction, and I think Harry and I are both the same. Do you feel it's a form of escapism, and what is it that why do you say that you love writing fiction? What is it about that fiction world that you enjoy writing?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's escapism. It's more. I'll tell you, especially when I was in practice full time and right out of medical school, especially, it was a form of catharsis.
Mm.
Medical training, right? We expect our doctors to be humane and caring and loving and all those good words, and yet medical training is just the opposite. It's brutal. It's dehumanizing. It's working 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. And that was very uh, um, hard on me. And so writing at that stage of the game, especially, and even into my practice, it was very cathartic. It was getting stuff out. It was Not that a lot of my writing is medically oriented, although some of it certainly is, but it was just getting stuff out, processing it. I'm sure what was boiling in my subconscious out into the conscious and out onto the written page.
And what sort of issues? I often say the same thing that when I first started writing, I was writing police procedurals, crime fiction, and I was kind of conveying my truth of the world and frustrations from what I'm seeing. I think Harry was the same. What are some specific issues for you, Ed, that you say it was, cathartic, therapeutic to things that you felt you needed to discuss through the guise of fiction?
Well, in terms of medicine, again, I think it's the dehumanizing aspect of training. It's a dehumanizing aspect of practice. I mean, doctors are expected, at least in the States, I don't know how it is over there for you all, but I mean, doctors in corporate medicine, especially these days, in 2025, are expected to see 25, 30, 35 patients a day, at least, if not 40 patients a day, meaning patients every 12 to 15 minutes. Well, patients aren't cut and dry. They're not stamped cookies. They're not little widgets on an assembly line. Everybody has problems. And so I banged my head against the bureaucratic wall for 30 years against that, rallying against that, and got into some very interesting discussions with the bureaucrats and administrators saying, I'm not doing it. If you want it, and there were times when I'd say, I'm not doing it. So if you don't want me to do it, then fire me because I'm not. If a patient comes in and they've been there for their allotted 12 minutes, and at the end of their time, they say, and I ask them, are there any other questions? And they say, yeah, I feel like killing myself. I'm not going to say, oh, hold on to that thought. We'll
Minutes is
talk
up.
next time. That's right. No. So, uh, I mean, stuff like that, I needed to process and I needed to write about. And so, yeah.
And how does that translate into writing speculative fiction? How do you translate those thoughts and concerns into the kinds of stories that you write?
Um, I guess writing stories of hopelessness and despair, or at least getting out of hopelessness and despair. How do you do that? How does this character, what's their story arc? How do they're in a certain situation, how do they get out of that? And again, whether it's in a clinic or whether it's being chased by a monster, excuse me, you can still get out of that. Um, I'm working on a novel called The Birdhouse, which is a novel about internship set during the COVID era,
Right.
which to me is a horror story. So,
Yeah.
so that's how I do it.
It's interesting. You sort of mentioned the sort of dehumanizing aspect of of the way that you're expected to work. And I was when I heard you initially say that, I was thinking more of the fact that as paramedics we dehumanize our patients simply so that we don't have to worry about them.
Absolutely, you have to do that to a degree, and
Yeah.
people out there who aren't doctors or paramedics in the medical field might be, what are they talking about? But you have to do that psychologically to protect yourself, and unless you're a sociopath, which I don't think I am. So, um, if you let all that in, if you let all that negative energy in, it'll burn you alive. It'll burn you up
Yeah.
in a year or two.
Yeah, the way that we do, I don't know whether it happens so much with doctors, but certainly with paramedics, the way we do it is the very dark humor that we have. Is that the same in the sort of medical field? Because
1,000%. 1,000%. And
we
so
have
people,
far more opportunity to do it because we're in a cab away from the patient each time. Each patient we can walk away where you're still in your fishbowl often, and everyone can see you, so you can't make too many jokes.
right? Yeah, no, you don't want to make too many jokes, but absolutely. I mean, it is very dark humor, and often that dark humor does come out in my stories. I mean, both in my short stories and certainly in my novels. I mean, people say people will comment to me, "Wow, some of your stuff is really dark, but it's kind of funny too." Well, yeah, because you have to have that. You have to have that yin and yang. For me anyway, you have to have that balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we now move into your anthologies? So it's a collection of speculative fiction stories titled Where the Grass Don't Grow and Vultures Sing. It's a collection of 12 stories ranging from encounters with psychopathic aliens in the crumbling ruins of Detroit to facing monstrous ancient spirits in the desolate forests of Siberia. So tell us about I'm particularly interested, but we'll delve more into short story writing later in terms of how do you get those published in publications. But you've compiled, and I know Harry's done this as well, compiled a series of your own short stories into an anthology, easy for me to say, into an anthology as a book. So tell us about the evolution of that anthology and then the road to publication of that as a book.
You want the long story or the short story?
Whatever you
I've got
think.
plenty of time.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, we'll do the medium story. So as I say, I wrote when I was a kid, kind of tailed off when I hit adolescence, started writing again in college, um, and started writing more. And I thought, I want to be a writer, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you write stuff and you publish stuff. Well, I wrote, but I didn't publish, and I wrote, I didn't publish, and I would get a very nice box. Again, this is back pre-internet days of rejection letters. I worked as a research associate. My degree was in biological sciences. Then I got a master's degree in biological sciences and neurochemistry. So I was doing research before I became a physician. And I thought, I probably should do something. I'm getting, in my 20s. I'm getting grown up now. I probably should do something more than just being a researcher. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll go to medical school. But I really wanted to be a writer too. So um, we'll shorten this part up. I ended up going to medical, applying to and going into medical school. And after my first year, I thought, I really want to, I don't want to give up writing. I don't want to give that up. That part of me is strong and I want to keep it going. So I applied to and got into the Clarion Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Workshop at Michigan State University, where I was going to medical school. At the time, it was the preeminent writing workshop. It was 6 weeks long. And I had a lot of colleagues, I had a lot of mentors, counselors at medical school saying, "Don't do that. That's crazy. What are you going to do? Go to some crazy writing workshop? You should be working at a hospital, volunteering at a clinic." And I said, "Nah, I don't think so." So I went to Clarion, and at Clarion, I learned that I could really be a writer. I mean, I was with probably another 12 other people. Some of them had professional publications, some didn't, but I learned how to write. I learned how to edit ruthlessly. Um, and 2 years after I graduated Clarion, when I was still in medical school, I had my first professional sale to Pulphouse. And it just continued on. Again, there were times when writing was very slow because I was working 80 hours a week, but I just kept writing, accumulated a bunch of short stories. And finally, probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I thought, I think I'm gonna try to put some stories together and get a anthology published. This was after I had published Deep Roots, my first horror novel. So I probably at that time maybe had 25, 30 stories published, which isn't a lot at all, and I probably have had another half dozen that were gestating in various stages, almost ready, kind of ready. So I finished those off, picked another half dozen stories that I had published, put them together. And amazingly, I got a publisher in England, Baynam Books Press, that wanted to buy it. So that was the story of getting the anthology published.
And how did you select the 12 stories that ended up in the shortlist to go in the book? Did they meet a particular theme, or were they a really vast different range of types of stories?
That's a great question. And they are and they aren't. And I've thought about this a lot. The title of the collection, "Where the Grass Don't Grow and Vultures Sing," was deliberate. There's not a story that has that title, although I think it would make a great title for a story. But um, I wanted something. I wanted stories that were off kilter and yet not too crazy, not too off from our world. They're not set off in a distant galaxy far, far away. They're not set off in the land of Tolkien. They're all set in our world, and yet it's not our world. When I was growing up as a kid, the big TV shows for speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, horror were Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and Night Gallery. And so these stories sort of reflect that they're off kilter. They're our world, but they're not our world. And so that's probably the overriding theme. They are different. I mean, they're different stories. The shortest story in the anthology, I think, is 700 words. The longest is probably 8,000 plus. So they range first person, third person, uh, but they all have that sort of bizarro, phantasmagorical feel to them.
Mhm.
So that's how I got them together.
And if you've been writing as a alongside your work as a doctor, how have your colleagues sort of responded to you being a narrator? Do they know?
No, they didn't know. They did not know. I sort of kept that. I sort of kept my speculative fiction writing closeted until the last few years. Now I've come out of the closet, so to speak, and say, hey, yeah, I'm a science fiction or I'm a speculative fiction writer. If you want to read it, great. If you don't, don't. I don't really don't care anymore. So
Was there any reason for that? And there's a reason why I asked this question because I had a similar experience. Was there any reason why you felt you had to keep it kind of covert?
um yeah, because medicine is a very closed fraternity. It's very judgmental. I mean, if you step out of line, it is not a pretty thing. And I was stepping out of line enough already in going against the powers that be in terms of seeing number of patients seen, uh, uh, other things. I was never afraid to speak my mind, and so it was just sort of one line. I guess I wasn't brave enough to cross at the time. And again, near the end of my uh, full-time career, I just finally said, F it. I'm gonna, if anybody knows, I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
proud of what I do. I am. I'm happy to do it. So I wish I would have done that sooner, to tell you the truth.
It's so reassuring to hear someone else from a different profession go through the same thing. Harry and I have talked about this a lot. We both experienced this. We could both go into it in a lot more detail. But again, I was the same writing crime fiction as a serving police officer. I was concerned about what my colleagues would think about me as a serving officer doing real police work, but then making up writing made up stories. And as we
Hmm.
say here in Australia, they think you're a bit of a wanker for doing that sort of thing. Um, and I was terrified, and I kept it close to my chest for many, many years. And it wasn't until more recently that I have left the police that I felt more comfortable to grow into my own skin, and as you say, be proud of it and to own it. But it's amazing how we can become so concerned about the perceptions of others. And I know, Harry, you can speak to this as well.
Oh, look, I think my main concern wasn't particularly what my colleagues thought. It was more to do with what my bosses thought, because my sort of altered reality was a ambulance service that was pretty dysfunctional and may have reflected reality. But I thought I could get into a lot of trouble, and therefore I kept my I we both Jack and I both write under pseudonyms for that reason, to give that sort of like separation from our writing to our from our real jobs and stuff like that. So yeah, I wasn't worried about, I would love to have been able to crow from the rooftops that I'm writing and stuff like that. But I just didn't want to because I didn't want to lose my day job. So that was more my concern.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure we're not the only ones that feel that way. I'm sure a lot of writers, especially in professions, whether they're doctors or paramedics, police officers, uh, go through the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think there might also be those writers who go through that not only because of concerns about their professional, impacts on their professional career, but also just that fear of opening themselves up to potential criticism and that imposter syndrome and self-doubt. I'm sure there's a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of writers who said I've been writing for years and I was too terrified to let anyone read what I'd written because I was scared what they would think. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we all go through that, especially as younger writers, as novice writers. Again, I think as you say, Jack, as we grow into our skin, we're like, yeah, you know what? I'm good enough. I've shown I'm good enough. If people want to read it, great. If they don't, that's fine too.
Mm.
mm,
Can we
yeah.
talk about short story writing? We actually had another guest some time ago who was similar to you, specialized in writing short stories and had to some degree developed a career in terms of earning enough money to make it a self-sustaining job of writing short stories, being published in magazines and journals for which they were paying for these stories. Can you tell us a little bit more about this side of the industry that perhaps authors might not be aware of? For those people thinking, oh, for me to make money, I've got to get published by a big publishing house and write novels or non-fiction books. But there's also avenues with short story writing. Can talk us through that?
There certainly are avenues for the short story writing. Although I would say it is harder to make a living exclusively on short stories than writing novels, especially these days. Again, I'm not one of these guys that look back and say, oh, the good old days were the best old days. No, they were just old days. But having said that, um, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the pay and the opportunities for writing short stories and short story writers was greater in the sense of being able to make a living off of it. Conversely, there's more markets now, but they pay a lot less overall. Some are still professional sales, but a lot of markets pay a penny a word, 2 cents a word, and you would have to crank out a lot of stories to make a living on that.
Mhm.
So again, I think again, best of times, worst of times. It's best of times because the opportunities for short story writers are incredible now. I think there's just massive amounts of places that will publish short stories, whether it's genre fiction or not. Certainly for the genre writer, which I am, the opportunities have grown greatly, but they don't pay real well.
Mm.
Uh, I just sent a short story into a market pays 8,000 word story. They would pay me $35. So that's, you know, I love $35. I mean, it'll get me a couple drinks next weekend, but it's not, I'm not going to be able to live on that. I'm not going to be able to pay my taxes on that. So
Mm.
it is a challenge. I would not ever dissuade anybody from writing short stories. Obviously, I love writing short stories, but you really got to find high literary magazines like the New Yorker or something like that here in the States that will pay professional rates and pay you enough money to make a living off that.
I think from my experience that the short stories, the way you're going to make some money, and it's so hit and miss, is submitting your short stories to competitions because you're going to get it may cost you $35 to enter the competition, but if you actually win, you can stand to earn a decent amount of money if you can do it. But it's so subjective, and you're not going to make a living from it. You can make like a nice little side hustle if you're good enough, but it's hard work to get that. But as I've said in the past, is that one of the things you do is that by submitting to competitions, at least you still keep that copyright of that short story, and so you can then go and sell it for the $35 in a magazine somewhere if you don't get into the competition.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Harry. That's absolutely correct. I've shied away. I have entered some competitions, but I generally don't just because I don't like sending 35 or 20 or 30 or $40 into the competition because it is subjective. But you're absolutely right. You can. I mean, some competitions pay 500, $1,000 to the
Mm-hmm.
winners. So I haven't done that extensively, but and the ones I've entered, I've never won. So, but it certainly is an avenue that you can make more money than just going to an online magazine that pays a penny a word or two cents a
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
I've got a question about the general market of short stories. You spoke about these online publications. You got your big ones like your New Yorkers, and other ones that have been around for years. Probably a lot of them started as a printed journal or magazine or newspaper. Now it's all gone digital, and with that, we're starting to see a lot more of these smaller journals or magazines pop up. These online ones that are publishing short stories. In terms of from a readership, is there still a fan base out there? Are there still people out there? Clearly, these small online magazines must be able to sustain themselves by getting people to subscribe and pay subscriptions so that they can read short stories. And these small publications are surviving and some of them are thriving. So there must still be a fan base out there for people who are wanting to read these short stories. Well, what's been your experience with the general market from the consumer end?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jack. I think there is demand for it, and it's got to be a great demand because, as you say, there's a plethora now of these magazines and webzines that are looking for short stories. The other thing we I don't want to miss it, are podcasts, right? Podcast was not a word 20, 30 years ago.
Mm.
There's a significant number of podcasts that do short stories, genre stories. I had a short story published, if you will, in a podcast last year.
Yeah.
That paid pretty well. I think it was like $100 or $150. That's decent money for a 2,000, 3,000 word short story. So
Sorry to interrupt. Can you just
podcast,
explain that? Is that where you submit your written short story, and then the podcast will get a professional narrator to read your story and record that as a podcast? How does that work?
yeah, that's exactly just the way you said it. That's exactly how it works. You send in your short story, and it has to be amenable to podcasts, right? It can't be something very deep or no dialogue or anything like that. It has to be amenable to being spoken and on a podcast. And they tend to be most podcasts like that tend to be looking for stories 1,500 words, 2,000, 2,500 words. Some of them look for longer, but most of them are short stories. But they tend to pay pretty well, and it's kind of cool to hear. I mean, the first time I sold one and listened to my story, I'm like, yeah, I would have said that differently or something. It's like your child, right? It's like, oh no, I'd have done that differently, but it was interesting. So I've stayed in that market a little bit.
Mm.
I've heard that the horror genre is very big in those sort of podcast ones because
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
It,
and what happens is the podcasters play the roles of your characters, and they get into the sort of, so it's a bit more sort of you know worth watching on their video podcasts when they do them. It's quite interesting how they do that, and often they'll stop and make comments about the story as it's going on, so it sort of brings the viewers in, or the listeners into to the whole sort of process of the story.
Yeah, it is. It was fun. I mean, I'm glad I did it, and I'll certainly keep sending some stories off to them. Again, I generally don't. Although lately I've been writing more shorter stories, meaning 2,000 words or so. Um, Oftentimes, though, my stories are 5,000 to 10,000 words, so it's a little harder to get that done on a podcast.